I stood on the porch of my father's house, holding a tray with a homemade carrot cake I had been baking since 4:00 a.m. In the yard, kids were running around, my nieces and the neighbors' toddlers, hunting for Easter eggs I had hidden the night before, while crawling in the damp April grass with my phone flashlight. A table for 20 people was beautifully set. The catering from the Birchwood Grill had been paid for with my credit card. The string lights, the balloons, the tablecloths. It was all me. And then my father stood at the head of the table, raised his glass, looked right at me, and said a phrase that made something inside me snap. "Ashley, you are just a guest in this family now. Don't push your luck." My stepmother, Brenda, stood behind him. She smirked. She did not laugh or scoff. She just smirked with one corner of her mouth, like a person who had been waiting a long time for this moment and finally got it. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw the tray on the ground, although my hands were shaking so badly that the frosting on the cake trembled. I carefully set the tray on the table, turned around, walked into the house, took my purse from the coat rack in the hallway, and began to do what I should have done a long time ago. I started cutting off everything this family had taken for granted. But for you to understand why this exact moment was the final straw, I need to go back 3 years. My name is Ashley. I am 32. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, in a standard split-level house on Elm Street. My mom died when I was 14. Pancreatic cancer, aggressive, just 4 months from the diagnosis to the funeral. My father, Robert, was left with 2 kids, me and my little brother Dylan, who was 9 at the time. We managed. I learned to cook at 15. Not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. My dad worked shift hours at a manufacturing plant. He would come home gray from exhaustion, eat in silence, watch TV in silence, and go to sleep in silence. Dylan grew up as a quiet, withdrawn boy who sat around in headphones all day. I became the glue that held our little household together. I did the laundry, cleaned, went to Dylan's parent-teacher conferences, booked his doctor appointments, and checked his homework. After high school, I moved to New York City and got into NYU for accounting. It was not my lifelong dream, but I was good with numbers, and numbers, unlike people, do not lie. Although, as I found out later, people know how to lie even using numbers. In New York, I worked my way up from an intern at a small auditing firm to the chief accountant of TechCore, a mid-sized company making HVAC components, 120 employees. My salary was $140,000 a year. I had my own condo in Astoria, Queens, bought with a mortgage that I paid off early last year. I drove a modest Honda Civic, but it was mine, with no car payments. I am not rich, but I am a person who knows how to count money and is not afraid to work hard. And that is exactly what made me not a daughter to my family, but a resource. 3 years ago, in January, my dad called me and said he was getting married. Her name was Brenda. Brenda was a nice woman, worked as a nurse at a local clinic, and was now retired. She had a son, Tyler, who was 27, and lived in Wilkes-Barre. I was honestly thrilled. My dad was 56 and had been alone for 17 years. I wanted someone warm to be with him, someone who would not let him wither away in that Scranton house among the old furniture and my mom's curtains that he never changed. "Dad, I am so happy for you," I said then. And it was the truth. They had a modest wedding, signed the papers at the courthouse, and had dinner at a restaurant with 10 people. I drove in from New York and brought an envelope with $2,000 for their honeymoon. Brenda hugged me, called me sweetheart, and said she was so happy Robert had such a wonderful daughter. I melted. Nobody had called me sweetheart in 16 years. Not since I was 14. For the first few months, everything was great. Brenda brought order to the house. New drapes, spotless floors. There was always food in the fridge. My dad came back to life. He started calling more often. His voice sounded energetic. He talked about walking in the park, going to the movies, and how Brenda made a pot roast almost like my mom used to. He delicately added the word almost, and I appreciated that delicacy. By that time, Dylan was living in Allentown, working as an IT admin at some firm, not making much, but it was enough for him. He was a very low-maintenance guy anyway. A rented room, a computer, hitting the gym twice a week. We talked on the phone once a month and saw each other on Christmas and birthdays. Our relationship was normal, without much warmth, but without conflicts either. Brenda started calling me herself. At first, it was for advice. "Ashley, honey, how do I apply for this property tax relief program?" Then, just to chat. She talked about the neighbors, her TV shows, and how she wanted to plant roses on the porch. I listened, gave advice, and sometimes laughed. I liked the feeling that I had a family again, not just the wreckage of a family, not an obligation, but something warm and real. For the first Easter after the wedding, I drove to Scranton with a trunk full of groceries. I brought pastries from a New York bakery, an egg dyeing kit, and a basket of chocolate bunnies for the neighborhood kids. Brenda bustled around the kitchen. My dad was fixing the squeaky gate at the cabin. By then, they had started going to my mom's family cabin in the Poconos, about 40 minutes from the city. The cabin, that is probably where the first quiet shifts began, the ones I did not notice at the time. Mom's cabin, a small plot of land, a wooden house, apple trees, and garden beds. Mom adored that place. After she died, my dad, Dylan, and I went there every summer, but without much enthusiasm. Just going through the motions so the property would not get overgrown. The cabin was officially in my dad's name. Brenda fell in love with the place. She started going there every weekend from April to October. She planted flowers, painted the fence, and hung new curtains in the house. My dad was pleased. Brenda has golden hands, he would say on the phone. And then, during one of my visits, I noticed that my mom's photos on the wall in the cabin had disappeared. Where a framed picture of my mom standing by a blooming apple tree used to hang, there was now a calendar with kittens. "Dad, where are Mom's photos?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh," Brenda put them away. She says it makes her uncomfortable, having another woman looking at her from the wall. "You understand, right, Ashley?" I understood. Or rather, I decided back then that I understood. A new wife, a new life. No point clinging to the past. Mom probably would not have been offended. I found the photos in a box in the attic. I took them back to New York with me and put one on the shelf in my apartment. My mom, young, with a long braid, laughing, holding a basket of peaches. Every morning I looked at her while drinking my coffee. The summer passed quietly. In the fall, Brenda called and asked for help sorting out some documents. Something needed to be transferred regarding the cabin property. She was getting confused by the paperwork. I helped her remotely, explained which forms were needed, where to go at the county clerk's office, and thought nothing of it. And in December, right before Christmas, my dad called and asked for money. "Ashley, here is the thing. Brenda needs surgery. Her knee joint is completely worn out. The doctor says it needs a replacement. Through standard insurance, the wait list is a year, but a private clinic can do it now for $15,000 out of pocket. We do not have that kind of money. $15,000. I looked at my bank account. I had $20,000 sitting there, saved up for a bathroom renovation. The pipes had been leaking for 6 months, and the tiles were falling off. I had a bucket under the sink, catching the drips. "Of course, Dad. I will transfer it tomorrow." I sent it. The bathroom remodel could wait. Family is family. Brenda had the surgery in January. She called from the hospital, thanking me, crying. "Ashley, you are my guardian angel. I would have been limping for the rest of my life without you." I felt warm. I felt good. I felt needed, not as a function, not as an accountant, but as a daughter. And then February came, and Brenda stopped calling. Not abruptly. The calls just became less frequent. Once a week, then once every 2 weeks. Then I would call her myself and hear a rushed, "Oh, Ashley, I cannot talk right now. We are really busy here. Love you." I chalked it up to her rehab, the chores, the winter blues. But in early March, Dylan sent me a text without any preface, just like he always does, dry and straight to the point. "Ash, did you know Brenda's son Tyler moved from Wilkes-Barre into Dad's house? He's living in my old room now." I read the message 3 times, then called my dad. "Dad, is it true? Tyler is living with you?" A pause. Long and heavy, like a bag of cement. "Well, yeah, temporarily. Things did not work out for him in Wilkes-Barre. He lost his job." Brenda asked. I could not say no. He is a normal, quiet guy. A quiet guy, Tyler, 27 years old, no job, no education, but now with a permanent Scranton address in our house, in the room where Dylan grew up, where the marks from his Metallica posters were still on the walls. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a long time, looking at my mom's photograph. The peaches in the basket, my mom's smile, and a strange pulling sensation under my ribs, as if somewhere far away, in the house of my childhood, someone was slowly, carefully changing the locks. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my Astoria condo, stared at the ceiling, and tried to organize everything on shelves. Like I was used to. Like an accountant. Debit, credit, balance. Tyler moved into the house. Okay. The guy is 27. Lost his job. His mother asked. His stepfather did not refuse. It is normal. Human nature. Temporarily. I repeated that word like a mantra. Temporarily. People help each other. That is normal. I gave $15,000 for a surgery myself, and do not regret it. That means my dad has the right to help his stepson. Logical. Logical. In the morning, I brewed coffee, looked at my mom's picture, and decided, I will not blow this out of proportion. I will call Dylan, get the details, and that is it. Maybe he is exaggerating, Dylan answered after the third ring. His voice was flat, but I knew my brother. When he speaks with absolutely no intonation, it means he is boiling inside. Ash, I am not exaggerating. I went to visit Dad last weekend. Tyler is sitting in my room. It has his couch, his TV, his stuff. There is a sign on the door. Imagine that. A sign. Tyler's room. Brenda hung it up. A sign? I asked. A wooden one, with burned-in letters, like from a summer camp. I was silent. Dylan continued. And he is legally added to the lease. Ash, Dad put him on the residency paperwork. I asked him straight out. Dylan said, Dad claimed Brenda asked for it because he needed a local address to get a job. But you know that being added to a rent-to-own city lease is not just a stamp. I knew very well. Our house was part of a municipal rent-to-own program the city ran for working-class families. My dad was the primary leaseholder. If he added Tyler to the official lease, Tyler gained equal tenant rights to the property. And when the time came for the city to finally transfer the deed over to the residents, Tyler would legally get his own equal share of the house. Dylan, what about you? You took your name off the lease when you moved to Allentown 2 years ago. Dad told me, why do you need to be on the paperwork? You do not live here anymore. It just messes up the household income limits for the city. My fingers turned cold. Dylan had taken his name off. I had taken mine off even earlier. When I bought my condo in New York, there were now 3 people legally registered in our Scranton home. Dad, Brenda, and Tyler. Dylan and I were nobody, legally strangers to those walls. But I stopped myself again. The house was still under the city program, not fully owned yet. Dad had the right to add whoever he wanted. He was the primary tenant. And anyway, maybe I was just overthinking? Maybe Tyler really would find a job temporarily and leave? I called my dad. Dad? Dylan told me about Tyler. I am not against it, really. I just want to understand if this is long-term. My dad stayed silent. Then he spoke in a voice that was not his own. The voice he used when Brenda was standing right next to him. I had learned to distinguish it. When he was alone, his voice was deep, calm, with pauses. When she was near, it was slightly higher, faster, cautious. Ashley, Tyler is family. Brenda is my wife. Tyler is her son. We are one family now. Stop keeping score about who is temporary and who is not. Dad, I am not keeping score. Ashley, do not start. Brenda will get upset. She already worries that you and Dylan do not accept her. I opened my mouth and closed it. Do not accept her. I gave $15,000 for her surgery. I called her every week. I brought groceries, gifts, helped with her paperwork. Where, exactly, did I not accept her? But I stayed quiet, said, okay, Dad, I am sorry, and hung up. March passed quietly. I buried myself in work. The audit season was starting at TechCore. I sat over reports until 10:00 p.m., ate sandwiches at my desk, and tried not to think about the Scranton house, the wooden sign on the door, or the lease. In mid-April, Brenda called. Her voice was like honey, warm, as if nothing had happened. Ashley, sweetheart, Dad and I were thinking, let's get everyone together for Easter. A big family block party in the yard, just like the old days. We will invite the neighbors, Dylan, Tyler, the neighborhood kids. It will be wonderful. Sounds nice, I said cautiously. Only thing is, sweetheart, you know money is tight for us. My pension is small. Dad makes pennies at the plant. But we want it to be beautiful, a proper feast, something we will not be ashamed to show people. You can help, right? You are our smart girl. You make good money. I felt something prickly stir inside me. Something small but sharp, like a fishing hook you swallow without noticing. And now it was scratching from the inside. How much do you need? I asked. Well, we figured, if we order catering so we do not have to cook, and get decorations, and chocolate eggs for the kids, maybe around $2,000. $2,000 for an Easter dinner. Is Tyler working now? I asked. A short pause, but I caught it. Tyler is still looking. It is hard for him, you understand. The job market here is tough. He goes to interviews. He is trying. Okay, I will transfer it, I said. And I sent $2,000. Plus I separately ordered the catering from the Birchwood Grill. That cost another $1,500, because Brenda called me 2 days later and said the first money had already gone towards something else. It just happened. You will not be mad, right? What something else was, I did not ask. I was afraid to hear the answer. A week before Easter, I took 3 days of PTO and drove to Scranton. I brought yard decorations. String lights, balloons, baskets for the eggs. I stopped at the supermarket and bought another $200 worth of groceries on top of the catering, just in case, to make sure there was enough. I woke up at 4:00 a.m. on Saturday, baking the carrot cake, the frosting, the decorations. 4 beautiful cakes, each one a work of art. Brenda did not help with the cooking. She was not feeling well. Her knee was aching from the rain after the surgery. She sat in the armchair, watching TV. Tyler did not help either. He slept until noon, then came out in sweatpants, took my cheese and my ham out of the fridge, made himself a sandwich, and went back to his room. I stood by the stove, mixing batter, and watched him walk away. A 27-year-old man, healthy, broad-shouldered. No thank you, no good morning, no can I help. He just took it and left. On Easter Eve, I crawled around the yard, hiding dyed eggs and chocolate bunnies for the kids. The ground was wet from the rain. My jeans were soaked to the knees. My hands were freezing. The flashlight on my phone illuminated the bushes, and I hid eggs under every single one. In the grass, inside the hollows of the old apple trees, under the bench, 32 eggs, 20 bunnies. I counted everything, made a map so none would get lost and rot later. When I returned to the house, covered in mud and freezing, Dad, Brenda, and Tyler were sitting in the living room, drinking tea and eating my expensive Godiva chocolates I had brought. Tyler did not even look up. Ashley, you should change, Brenda said, looking at my muddy jeans. I just mopped the floors. Not thank you for setting everything up. Not great job. You should change. I just mopped the floors. I nodded, went to the bathroom, turned on the water, and stood there for 3 minutes, looking at my reflection in the mirror. Dark circles, hair in a ponytail, a smear of frosting on my cheek. 32 years old, chief accountant, my own condo, my own car, and I am standing in the bathroom of my father's house, where I was invited not as a daughter, but as a sponsor and the help. But I suppressed that feeling again. Tomorrow is Easter. There will be a beautiful table, happy kids. Dad will give a toast. Everyone will smile. It is worth enduring for that. Easter morning turned out sunny. I got up at 6:00 a.m., arranged the cakes in baskets, checked the tables in the yard, and set out the plates. The catering arrived at 10. Hot dishes, appetizers, salads. I met the delivery guys, checked everything off the list, and paid them. By 11, guests started arriving. Neighbors with kids, Dad's friends from the plant, my great-aunt Valerie from the next town over. Dylan drove down from Allentown, silent as always. We hugged. How are you? He asked quietly. Fine, a bit tired. He looked at the tables, the lights, the catering trays. This was all you? Who else? I smiled. It came out crooked. Dylan did not say anything, but he squeezed my shoulder. And there was more in that gesture than in all of Brenda's sweethearts over the last 2 years. Tyler came out to the table in a clean white shirt, hair combed, shaved, for the first time in the 3 days of my visit. Brenda introduced him to the neighbors. And this is my Tyler. He lives here now, helps his dad and me out. Helps out. I almost choked on my sparkling water. And then everyone sat down at the table. 20 people. Beautiful, festive, like a picture. My dad stood up, raised his glass. I waited for the toast. Something about family, about Easter, about a blessed day. Maybe he would say thank you to me, to Brenda, to everyone. Maybe just Happy Easter and that would be enough. My dad looked at me and said what he said. You already know that phrase. But you do not know what happened after I went into the house and grabbed my purse. Or rather, what I discovered while I was looking for it. My purse was not hanging where I had left it. In the morning, it was on the coat rack in the hallway. I remember exactly because I hung it on the third hook from the left, like always. Now it was lying on the floor in the corner behind the shoe rack. Someone had taken it down and dropped it. I picked up my purse, mechanically checking it. Phone, wallet, car keys, all there. But next to the shoe rack stood a white, opaque envelope with the county clerk's logo on it. I would have walked right past it if the corner of a familiar form had not been sticking out of the envelope. A blue stripe, official government font. I pulled out the papers. My hands were no longer shaking. After my father's phrase, something inside me had turned off, and I became as cold as a calculator. It was an application to transfer the city deed into a joint tenancy. 3 copies, 3 signatures. Robert Davis, Brenda Jenkins, Tyler. Tyler's last name was Jenkins too. Date of filing, 2 weeks ago. The county clerk's stamp. Everything was neat, strictly by the book. 3 people, 3 equal shares. Our house, my mom's house, ours, where I grew up, where Dylan grew up, where Mom used to make cherry preserves and sing in the kitchen, was being divided into 3 equal parts. And not a single one of those parts belonged to me or Dylan. I stood in the hallway with the papers in my hands, while outside the window, children's voices rang out, and my father was giving a toast to our united family. I put the papers back in the envelope, neatly, perfectly aligned, edge to edge, the way I stack quarterly reports at work. My hands did not shake. Inside, it was empty and echoing, like an empty barrel someone had punched. The deed transfer. 3 shares. Dad, Brenda, Tyler. I took out my phone and photographed every single page. The filing date, the signatures, the county stamp. I documented everything. Then I put the envelope exactly where it had been, picked up my purse, and walked out onto the porch. The party was still going on at the table. Kids were squealing, running around the yard with chocolate bunnies. Aunt Valerie was talking about her garden seedlings. Dad was pouring drinks. Brenda sat next to him, her hand resting on his forearm. The gesture of an owner, not a wife. Tyler was chewing a piece of the catered roast beef, the one that cost me $1,500, and scrolling on his phone. I walked up to the table. Dylan looked at me and instantly knew something had happened. He knows how to read my face, even though we only see each other 4 times a year. Dylan, step out for a minute, I said quietly. We walked behind the house to the old plum tree Mom had planted when I was born. Every year the tree yielded small, sour fruit, but Mom loved it and never let Dad cut it down. I showed Dylan the photos on my phone. He looked at them in silence, swiping, zooming in. His expression did not change, but I saw the knuckles of his fingers turn white as he gripped my phone. 2 weeks ago, he finally said. They filed 2 weeks ago and did not tell us a thing. No, Tyler was added to the lease 6 months ago. That is enough time to qualify to be on the deed transfer. 3 equal shares. Legally, you and I have no rights. We took our names off. Ash, they planned this. I nodded. I had already realized all of this, but hearing it from Dylan, hearing it out loud, felt like a second physical blow. What do we do? He asked. Right now, nothing. Right now, I am going to go talk to Dad. Dylan grabbed my sleeve. Not in front of everyone, Ash. Not in front of everyone, I agreed. I went back to the table, sat in my seat, and faked a smile for 40 minutes. I ate the salad I paid for, drank the sparkling water I brought. I listened to Brenda tell Aunt Valerie what a wonderful husband she had and how they were building everything together. I watched my dad nod, satisfied, full, and not once, not a single time during the entire meal, did he look in my direction. The guests started to leave around 4. Aunt Valerie left in a cab. The neighbors walked back to their houses. Tyler was the first to go inside, not even taking his plate with him. Brenda also stood up. Oh, I am so tired. I am going to lie down. Ashley, you will clean up, right? Since you are already here. Since I am already here. Dylan started silently stacking the disposable plates into a trash bag. I walked up to my dad, who was sitting alone at the head of the empty table, finishing his iced tea. Dad, can we talk? He looked up at me from below. The sun was already setting, and in the slanted light, his face looked older. Deep wrinkles around his mouth, bags under his eyes. My father. The man who had eaten my dinners for 17 years and worn the shirts I ironed since I was 15. About what? I took out my phone, opened the photo of the deed application, and turned the screen toward him. The silence lasted about 5 seconds. Then my dad put his glass on the table, slowly, carefully, not spilling a drop. You were digging through our papers? Not. I wanted to tell you. Not. Let me explain. You were digging through our papers. Dad, this is an application to sign the deed over to you, Brenda, and Tyler, without Dylan and me. You filed it 2 weeks ago and did not even call us. Why would I call? Your names are off the lease. You have nothing to do with this house legally. Legally, maybe. But what about morally? My dad stood up. He was a head taller than me, and whenever he straightened up, it always worked. I felt small, a 14-year-old standing by my mother's hospital bed. Ashley, I already told you, you are a guest in this family now. You have your own condo in New York, your own life. Dylan has his. But I live here, along with my wife and her son. We have the right to put the house in our names. Brenda is right. You have no business laying claim to something that does not belong to you. Brenda is right, I repeated. Dad, do you hear yourself? This is the house where Mom died, where I grew up, where Dylan grew up. And now a third of this house is going to a guy who has lived here for 6 months and does not even say thank you? Tyler is a good kid. He will find a job, get back on his feet. He needs stability. And us? We didn't need it? I gave you two everything I could. You grew up, got an education, you are working. Stop hanging on my neck. Hanging on his neck. Me, who gave $15,000 for a surgery. Me, who had just spent almost $4,000 on a holiday where he called me a guest. I wanted to say it out loud. I wanted to take out my phone, open my banking app, and show him the transfers. $15,000, $2,000, $1,000, $500, $200 for groceries, $100 for gas, $500 for gifts. A total of $25,000 over the last year and a half. $25,000 of my money poured into this house, into this family, into this guest. But I didn't. Because I realized numbers would not convince him. He was already convinced by Brenda, convinced that I was an outsider, that my money was not help but a payoff, that I paid not out of love but out of guilt, and he believed it because it was more convenient for him. Okay, Dad, I said. He blinked. He was waiting for a scandal, screaming, tears. He had prepared for that. I saw his shoulders relax when I said okay. He thought he had won. Good girl. No need to fight on Easter. I turned around and walked to my car. Dylan was standing by the gate with a trash bag in his hand. He had heard the whole conversation. Ash, get in the car. Let's talk on the way. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Scranton rolling by outside the window. Familiar streets, familiar houses, an unfamiliar feeling inside. Like a key that always fit the lock, suddenly refusing to turn. Dylan spoke first. I did some digging. Tyler didn't just lose his job in Wilkes-Barre. He moved out of his mother's apartment because he got into a massive legal fight with his ex-wife. They were divorced but still living together. The apartment there was in her name, and she took him to court to have him formally evicted. He lost. Brenda brought him here, to Dad's house, because he literally had nowhere else to go. And now, he is on the lease, on the deed, a third of the house. From practically homeless to a homeowner in 6 months. I gripped the steering wheel. How do you know this? I have a buddy from high school who works at the county courthouse down there. He ran his name through the system. Tyler Jenkins, 27, evicted by court order 4 months ago. 4 months. So he came to Scranton not 6 months ago, but more recently. And they added him to the paperwork incredibly fast. Dad, as the primary leaseholder, had the right, and they immediately filed for the deed transfer. It was all planned. Brenda knew Tyler needed housing, and found a way to secure it at the expense of our family home, at the expense of our dad. Dylan, you realize that if this deed goes through, Tyler gets a third of the house outright. He could sell his share, or Brenda could sell hers. 2/3 of the house will belong to strangers. Dad will be left with 1/3 of his own home. I know, and he doesn't see it. Dylan looked out the window. Actually, he does see it, Ash. He just didn't choose us. I dropped Dylan off at the bus station. He took the last bus back to Allentown. As we said goodbye, he told me, if you need legal help, any kind of help, call me. I am in. I nodded and hugged him. He smelled like cheap deodorant and garbage bags. We never even washed our hands after cleaning up. My little brother, quiet, withdrawn Dylan, who never said a word more than necessary, the only person in this family who did not treat me like an ATM. I drove back to New York. 2 hours on the highway. Night, semi-trucks, yellow streetlights. I thought, calculated, and like an accountant, laid the situation out line by line. Line 1. The house. The deed transfer was filed. If we don't contest it, in 2 or 3 months they will get the title. Dylan and I are legally clear. We took our names off the lease voluntarily. It will be hard to make a claim. Line 2. The cabin. Mom's cabin in the Poconos was registered in Dad's name. If he dies, the primary heirs are Brenda as his wife, and Dylan and me as his kids. But if Dad signs the cabin over to Brenda while he is still alive, I remembered that phone call. Ashley, help me with the paperwork for the cabin. What exactly she was transferring, I never checked. I helped her blindly, like an idiot. Line 3. Money. $25,000. Transfers to Dad's account, to Brenda's account. Paying for catering. Not a single receipt of debt, not a single contract. Legally, they were gifts. Unrecoverable. Line 4. Me. A 32-year-old woman who thought she was buying her family's love, but was actually funding her own replacement. I got back to Astoria at 2:00 a.m., went up to my condo, lay down on the bed without undressing, and stared at the ceiling. Mom's photograph was on the shelf. The peaches, the smile, the long braid. Mom, I said out loud to the empty apartment, they are taking everything that was yours, and I do not know how to stop it. Mom did not answer, but in the morning, when I opened my eyes, my head was as clear as the air after a thunderstorm. I knew what the first step had to be. Check the cabin, find out whose name was on the deed right now. And if my suspicions were correct, it meant Brenda had been playing the long game. It meant all the sweethearts and my angels were not words of love, but a distraction. And it meant it was time for me to stop being convenient. I opened my laptop and went to the county assessor's website. The property records loaded in 40 seconds. I stared at the screen and felt something turning slowly and heavily inside me, like a rusty gear in an old mill starting up after a long standstill. The Poconos cabin, the acreage, the parcel number, the zoning. Everything familiar, everything Mom's. But under owner, it did not say Robert Davis. It said Brenda Jenkins. Date of recording, November of last year. That same November when Brenda called asking me to help her sort out the paperwork for the property. I had explained to her what forms were needed for a title transfer, where to go, how to file. I, an accountant with a decade of experience, had used my own hands to help this woman steal my mother's cabin, a quitclaim deed, a gift. My father had gifted the cabin to Brenda voluntarily, notarized, entirely by the book. I closed the laptop, opened it, closed it again. Then I got up, went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, drank it in one gulp, and stood by the sink, listening to the clock ticking on the wall. It was 3:00 a.m. Outside, Astoria was asleep. Dark windows, sparse streetlights, silence, Mom's cabin, the apple trees she planted, the garden beds she watered every morning at 6:00 a.m., while Dylan and I slept, the peaches from the photo, the plum tree she planted when I was born. All of it now belonged to the woman who took down Mom's photos and hung up a calendar with kittens. In the morning, I called Dylan. Dylan, check the county property records. The cabin in the Poconos. I will text you the parcel number. 10 minutes later, he called back. His voice sounded like he had swallowed glass. Brenda Jenkins. Since November. Ash. He gave her the cabin. Yes, it is Mom's cabin. I know. A pause. I could hear Dylan breathe heavily, with a slight wheeze. He had asthma since childhood, and whenever he got nervous, his breathing hitched. Ash, I just did the math. The house is being split 3 ways. We get 0. The cabin was gifted to Brenda. We get 0. Almost 25 grand in cash with no IOUs. Bottom line, we have been completely cleaned out. We have nothing left connecting us to our parents' estate. I stayed silent. This is not an accident, Ash. It is a scheme. She has been working him for 2 years. I know, Dylan. I see it all. Give me a day. I need to think. But I could not think. Instead of thoughts, the same scene kept looping in my head. Brenda hugging me at the wedding. Ashley, I am so happy Robert has such a wonderful daughter. Her warm hands, the smell of her heavy floral perfume, the sincere as I thought back then tears. 2 years. For 2 years, she called me sweetheart, called to chat about TV shows and porch roses, while simultaneously taking down my mom's photos, moving her son in, putting him on the lease, getting the cabin as a gift, and filing for the house deed. Every move as calculated as a chess match. And I, an idiot with a master's in accounting, did not see a single one. At work, I walked around like a ghost. My coworkers asked what was wrong. I brushed it off. Just tired. Spring fatigue. My boss, Richard, popped into my office, looked at the dark circles under my eyes, and said, "Ashley, take a mental health day. You look totally drained." I did not take it. I needed work, the only place where numbers did not lie. 2 days after Easter, my dad called. I did not answer right away. I stared at the screen, at the word dad, and could not force myself to hit the green button. I answered on the 5th ring. "Ash, hey, how was the drive back?" As if nothing had happened. As if you are a guest here never happened. As if the deed transfer in the cabin never happened. "Fine, Dad. Listen, here is the thing. Brenda's birthday is coming up in 2 weeks, May 12th. She is dreaming of a new washing machine. Ours completely died. She is washing clothes by hand. Could you maybe?" I laughed loudly. Really laughed. For the first time in 3 days. My dad went silent. "Ash, what is wrong with you?" "Dad, are you serious? You called me a guest. You are signing the house over without us. You gave Mom's cabin to Brenda, and now you are calling to ask for money for a washing machine?" Silence. Then, Brenda's voice in the background, a fast, hissing whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone. Instructions. "Ashley," my dad started speaking in a different tone, harsher. "I do not know what you are talking about. The cabin was my decision. I have the right to do what I want with my property, and the house paperwork is entirely legal. If you do not like it, talk to a lawyer instead of throwing a tantrum." "I am not throwing a tantrum. I am asking a question. Why are you calling me for money if I am just a guest?" More whispering from Brenda. Then Dad spoke, and I could hear that he was reading someone else's words, like an actor off a script. "Ashley, we are grateful for your help, but help is a voluntary thing. We did not force you. If you were helping just so you could hold it over our heads later, that is not help. That is manipulation. Manipulation. My help was manipulation. $15,000 for her surgery was manipulation. $4,000 on Easter was manipulation. Me, on my knees in the freezing mud hiding eggs for strangers' kids, a manipulator. Who wrote that script for you? Dad? Brenda? He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand and stared at the dark screen. In the reflection, my face was blurry, dark, and I suddenly thought, he didn't say anything back about the washing machine. That means he will call again. Or Brenda will call. In a week, with a honey-sweet voice, calling me sweetheart and honey. And that is exactly what happened. 4 days later, a call from Brenda. "Ashley, sweetheart, what is going on? Why are we fighting? Your dad lost his temper. You know how he is. He is rough around the edges, but he loves you. We all love you. Let's not ruin our relationship over some pieces of paper. The cabin, the house, it is all just formalities. Family is what matters. Formalities. The house I grew up in. The cabin my mom watered at dawn. Formalities. Brenda," I said evenly, "I am not buying the washing machine." A pause. 1 second. 2, 3. "Well, sweetheart, it is not just for me. It is for the whole family. Your dad does laundry too. And Tyler. Tyler is a healthy 27-year-old man. Let him get a job and buy it. Or wash his clothes by hand. His arms work just fine." Brenda's voice shifted. The honey melted off, just like the frosting on my Easter cake. Underneath, there was cold steel. "Ashley, do not bring my child into this. Tyler is my son, and I will defend him to the grave. And you, if you are going to help, then help. But if not, do not expect us to welcome you back here with open arms. I am already not welcome, Brenda. I am a guest, remember? Your husband explained that to me on Easter in front of 20 people." She hung up. No goodbye. No love you. Just a dial tone. I put the kettle on. My hands were not shaking, which was strange because inside, there was a hurricane. But my hands were calm, like a surgeon's, or like an accountant who just found a massive embezzlement in the books and is now methodically gathering evidence. That evening, I opened my banking app and downloaded every transfer for the last 2 years. each with a date, amount, and recipient. I made an Excel spreadsheet. Total: $25,700. I had made a mistake in my initial math. I forgot about the little transfers. $150 for medication, $250 to fix the roof at the cabin, $100 for Tyler to buy a suit for an interview. Little things that added up to a sum that could have easily paid for my bathroom renovation. The pipes were still leaking. The bucket under the sink was still there. And then I did what I had been putting off. I called a lawyer. I found her through a connection. A colleague from HR recommended Miss Sterling, an attorney who specialized in family and estate disputes. I booked a consultation. Miss Sterling met me in a small office in Midtown Manhattan, a dry, short-haired woman in her 50s, with a sharp gaze over her glasses. I laid everything out in front of her. The property records for the cabin, the photos of the deed application, the spreadsheet of bank transfers. She looked at them for about 3 minutes, then took off her glasses and looked at me. Ashley, legally, you are in a tough spot. You and your brother took your names off the lease voluntarily. The cabin was transferred via a gift deed. You can only contest it if you prove your father was incompetent or acted under duress. Proving spousal duress is practically impossible. The house deed transfer is also legal, assuming everyone on the current lease agrees. So, nothing? I asked. I did not say nothing. I said it is a tough spot. There are nuances. If the house deed hasn't been finalized yet, we can drag out the process. If you can prove that you were convinced to take your names off the lease under false pretenses that your father promised it was just a formality, you have a shot. But this means court, this means time, this means money. And most importantly, this means going to war with your own father. Going to war with my own father. I sat across from Miss Sterling and realized, I am not ready. Not because I am scared, but because somewhere deep down, under the layers of resentment and anger, a tiny flame of hope still flickered that my dad would come to his senses. That he would call and say, Ash, I am sorry. I was wrong. That Brenda was not a monster, but just a scared woman protecting her son the only way she knew how. False hope, the most dangerous thing in the world, more dangerous than any deed of gift. I thanked Miss Sterling, paid $250 for the consultation, and walked out into Manhattan. It was May, warm and sunny. New York was blooming. People were walking with ice cream, laughing, kissing on benches, and I stood at a crosswalk and thought, maybe I should call Dad one more time, calmly, without accusations, just talk. And I did call. A week later, on May 12th, Brenda's birthday, I called to congratulate her. I decided I would be the bigger person. I would be the adult. I would extend an olive branch. Tyler picked up the phone. For the first time through this whole ordeal, I heard his voice. Low, lazy, drawing out his vowels. Hello? Tyler. Hi. It is Ashley. Can I speak to Brenda? Mom is busy. We are having a party. Call back later. And he hung up. I stood in the middle of my kitchen in Astoria, with the phone to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Under the sink, water steadily dripped into the bucket. Drip, drip, drip. Mom's photograph looked at me from the shelf. The peaches, the smile, the long braid. Call back later. No, I will not call back later. Later, it will be a completely different conversation, and I won't be the one starting it. For 2 weeks after that call, I did not speak to my dad, nor to Brenda, and certainly not to Tyler. The phone was silent on their end, too. Not a single message, not a single missed call. It was as if I had been neatly erased with a rubber eraser, leaving not even a smudge on the paper. I went to work, finalized reports, ate lunch in the cafeteria on the first floor, went back to Astoria, lay on my bed, and stared at the ceiling. The bucket under the sink would fill up. I would empty it, put it back. Drip, drip, drip. That sound became the soundtrack of my life. In late May, something happened that I did not expect. My company announced layoffs. TechCore had lost contracts. 2 major clients had jumped ship to competitors. Revenue dropped by 30%. Richard called me into his office. Ashley, you know how much I value you, but management has decided to outsource the accounting department. We don't need an in-house chief accountant anymore. I fought to get you 3 months of severance. That was the best I could do. 3 months of severance. $36,000. Good money, but I had lost my job for the first time in 10 years. I walked out of his office, sat at my desk, looked at the stack of report binders, and thought, this is it. This is rock bottom. My family turned their backs on me. My job is gone. The pipe in my bathroom is leaking, and all I have is a severance package that will shrink every month. My last day fell on a Friday. My coworkers chipped in for a cake and a bouquet. Irene from HR hugged me and whispered, Ash, you will find something better. You are the best accountant I have ever known. I smiled, thanked everyone, carried the cake to my car, and thought, who am I going to call tonight? Who will I tell? I got fired. I am scared. I couldn't tell Mom. Mom is in a picture holding a basket of peaches. She won't answer. I couldn't tell Dad. He would say, well, you were acting all high and mighty. Now look at you, sitting there with no money. Definitely not Brenda. Dylan? Dylan would listen, say, hang in there, and hang up. He didn't know how to comfort people. He never learned, because nobody ever comforted him since he was 9. I got home, put the cake on the table, opened a cheap bottle of wine from Trader Joe's, and sat in the kitchen alone. Outside, Astoria lived its life. Kids on the playground, dogs barking, someone laughing, and I sat and drank wine from a mug that said Best Accountant, which they had given me for Christmas at TechCore. The wine went fast. I reached for my phone, not knowing why, just out of habit, the way people open the fridge, not because they are hungry, but because they feel empty. I opened my messages. The last text from my dad was from a month ago. Ash, call me back. I hadn't called back then, and I wasn't going to now. But further down, I saw a message I had missed from Dylan, sent 3 days ago. Ash, call me when you can. Important, not about Dad, about something else. I dialed his number. He answered immediately. Dylan, what happened? Are you sitting down? I am sitting in the kitchen drinking wine. Good. Listen, I found something out. Remember I said my buddy in Wilkes-Barre works at the county courthouse? He dug deeper on Tyler Jenkins. Ash, Tyler has a felony record. Fraud. Identity theft. What? 2 years ago, he took out personal loans using forged documents in his ex-wife's name. She pressed charges. He got probation because the amount was relatively small, like $6,000. But he has an active, unexpunged felony. I put the mug on the table. Wine sloshed onto the tablecloth. A dark red stain spread, like a bruise. Dylan, are you sure? 100%. My buddy has access to the database. I double-checked it through public court records. Found the judgment online. Tyler Jenkins, born 1997, Wilkes-Barre. Felony fraud. 18 months probation. That is why his ex-wife was able to evict him so fast. After the conviction, the judge revoked his right to live in the property. A scammer. Tyler was a convicted fraudster. And this man was now officially on the lease of our house, participating in the deed transfer, and living off my father. Dylan, does Dad know? That is the million-dollar question. I don't think so. Brenda definitely knows. He is her son. But there is no way she told Dad. Why would she? He might not have agreed to put a convicted felon on his lease. I sat and stared at the red stain on the tablecloth. The stain looked like a map with bays, peninsulas, jagged edges, like a map of the territory I was losing. My family, my home, my money, my job. Everything was bleeding out, like the wine from the tipped mug. But in that moment, right in that very moment, something inside me shifted. It didn't snap. It didn't flip. It hardened. Like concrete that had been liquid for a long time, but finally set and turned to stone. I lost my job. Fine, I will find another one. I am an accountant with 10 years of experience. People in the industry know me. I lost $25,000. Fine. Money is just numbers. I know how to work with numbers. But I will not lose what is left of my mother. I will not let a fraudster and his mother take the house where my mom sang in the kitchen. Dylan, I said, I need your help. Not emotional. Practical. Are you in? A pause. Then Dylan spoke, and for the first time in a long time, I heard something resembling fire in his voice. I have been waiting for you to say that. What do we need? Come to New York on Saturday. I will put together a battle plan. We need to act fast. The deed transfer is already in process. If we don't intervene before the city finalizes the title, it will be 10 times harder. I will be there at 9:00 a.m. I hung up the phone, wiped the stain off the tablecloth, and opened my laptop. My hands were no longer shaking. My head was clear, clearer than it had been in 2 months. I opened a blank document and started typing. At the top, the header. Action, plan. Below, the bullet points. The deed. Find out the exact status of the application. If the documents are still pending with the city, file an injunction. Grounds. When Dylan and I signed off the lease, we did not consent to waiving our future property rights, and we were misled by the primary tenant, Dad. Legally, people who voluntarily leave a city lease lose their rights to the buyout. But if the waiver was signed under false pretenses before the intent to transfer the deed was disclosed, there is a small chance to contest it. Tyler's criminal record. The felony itself does not prevent him from being on a lease or a deed, but it is leverage. Dad doesn't know. If he finds out, he might think twice. And if he doesn't, this information will be very useful in court as a character reference for the person benefiting from the deed transfer. The cabin. A gift deed can be contested within a specific statute of limitations. Grounds. Dad acted under the undue influence of his spouse, not understanding the consequences. It is a weak argument, but in court, the totality of the circumstances matters. If we show the whole picture moving Tyler in, the deed transfer, gifting the cabin, systematically taking money from me, the judge might see the scheme. The money, $25,700 with no IOUs, but with bank statements. I can't get it back as a debt, but I can use it as evidence that I financially supported the family and had every reason to expect my familial ties and inheritance to remain intact. I typed until 2:00 a.m. Then I closed the laptop, lay down, and for the first time in a month, fell asleep instantly. No tossing and turning, no staring at the ceiling, no listening to the dripping water, because I finally had a goal again. Not revenge, though the anger was still there. Not self-pity, though the resentment burned under my ribs. Just cold, accounting clarity. Here is the objective. Here are the resources. Here are the deadlines. Debit, credit, balance. Dylan arrived on Saturday, exactly at 9:00 a.m., just as he promised. I opened the door. He stood on the threshold with a backpack and a plastic bag from a local bakery. He brought apple pies. Mom loved apple pies. I almost cried. Not because of the food, but because he remembered. Mom used to bake apple pies every Saturday, and we would eat them burning hot, standing right by the oven. We sat in the kitchen. I laid out the printed battle plan in front of him, annotated with legal statutes. He read it in silence, chewing on a slice of pie. Ash, we need a lawyer. Not just for a consultation. We need a retainer. This is heavy litigation. I know. Miss Sterling in Midtown. She agreed to take the case. I called her yesterday. I have the $2,500 for the retainer. I will chip in $1,500, Dylan said. I had it saved up for a new PC, but the PC can wait. I looked at my brother, 27 years old, skinny, in a stretched-out hoodie, with his eternal headphones around his neck. My little brother, who made maybe $45,000 a year, was ready to hand over his savings to go to war with our own father. For justice. For Mom. Dylan, thank you. He shrugged. It is our house. Our mom. I am not letting them have it. On Monday, I went to see Miss Sterling. She met me with coffee and a notepad. I laid everything out. Tyler's felony, the timeline of events, the bank statements. She listened, took notes, nodded occasionally. Ashley, I am not going to lie. This is a very tough case. But we have a trump card you didn't even think of. She opened a law book on her desk. The cabin. You said it was in your dad's name. But when exactly did he get the title? I thought for a second. The cabin belonged to Mom, or rather, my maternal grandparents. After they passed, the cabin went to Mom, and after Mom died, it went to Dad and us kids. But we were minors. Dad handled all the estate paperwork as our legal guardian. Wait, did you and Dylan ever formally waive your inheritance rights when you came of age? Miss Sterling smiled for the first time in our 2 meetings. Exactly. If the cabin was inherited from your mother, you and your brother are primary heirs under intestate law. If you practically inherited it, if you spent summers there, maintained it, but formally your names were never put on the deed, it doesn't mean you lost your rights. It means your father transferred the entire title into his own name, bypassing his fiduciary duty to his minor children. And then he gifted to Brenda something he did not fully own. My breath caught in my throat, meaning, the gift deed can be ruled partially invalid regarding you and your brother's shares. We need to pull the probate records, see how the estate was settled. If your father bypassed your rights as minor heirs, that is massive grounds for a lawsuit. I sat in the chair across from Miss Sterling and felt something hot ignite inside me. right in the place that had been empty and echoing for 2 months. Not anger, though there was anger too. Real hope. Hope backed by law, statutes, and precedents. Hope with a case number and a court stamp. Miss Sterling, how much time do we have on the house deed transfer? A month? Maybe 6 weeks. The statute of limitations for the cabin is usually a few years from when you discovered the fraud. You discovered it now, so the clock just started. This is very good for us. Very bad for your father. I hung up the phone and sat motionless for 10 minutes, staring at the wall. Good for us. That meant I was going to court against the man who fed me oatmeal, walked me to school, and cried at my mother's funeral, holding me so tight I could hear his heartbeat. And then I remembered. You are a guest in this family now. Don't push your luck. And his heartbeat stopped mattering. But the real rock bottom didn't hit because of the lawsuit. It hit on a regular Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. I was sitting at home, unemployed, scrolling through Indeed, blasting my resume to chief accountant vacancies. An unknown New York number called. Ashley Davis? This is Helen Crawford, from Apex Management. You applied for the chief accountant position. We would love to invite you for an interview. My first bite in 2 weeks. I was thrilled. Something inside me tugged, like a fish on a line. The company was solid. The salary was $160,000. Less than TechCore, but I couldn't afford to be picky right now. Of course, whenever is convenient. Tomorrow at noon. Our office is in the financial district. I put on my best suit, did my hair, concealed the dark circles under my eyes, and arrived 15 minutes early. The office was glass and steel, spotless, with a water cooler in the lobby. Helen Crawford, a woman about my age, sharp, with quick eyes, led me into a conference room. The interview went exceptionally well. I answered concisely, showed my portfolio, talked about the audit at TechCore, optimizing tax burdens, and dealing with the IRS. Helen nodded, took notes. And then she asked, Ashley, last question. Reason for leaving your previous position? The company lost a major contract, and they decided to outsource the entire accounting department. Understood. We will check references. Can we reach out to Richard? Absolutely. She smiled and shook my hand. I walked out onto Wall Street, feeling like life was getting back on track. A tiny break in the gray sky. 3 days later, Helen called back. Ashley, unfortunately, we have decided to move forward with another candidate. Thank you for your time. A standard rejection. It happens. But her voice was different. Not strictly professional, but awkward. Like someone who knows a secret but cannot say it. Helen, if I can ask honestly, what went wrong? A long pause. I really shouldn't share this. But we received, let's say, a highly negative reference. Not from Richard, he spoke very highly of you. From another source. Someone called our HR department anonymously and claimed that that you have issues with financial integrity. That you embezzled money from the company accounts. The world stopped spinning. The sounds vanished. Cars, voices, the wind, only my breathing, loud, like I was in a spacesuit. That is a lie, an absolute lie. Who called? I cannot disclose that. It was an anonymous call from a cell phone. A woman's voice. I am sorry. Ashley, I personally believe you, but upper management decided it was too much of a risk. A woman's voice, an anonymous call. I knew that voice. I had heard it hundreds of times. Honey sweet, warm, with its sweethearts and honeys. Brenda Jenkins. I could not prove it, but I knew it. The same way you know a storm is coming by the smell of the air, by the pressure in your temples. She had found out I was job hunting. Maybe Dad mentioned it. Maybe she overheard a conversation between me and Dylan, and she struck. That evening, I sat on the floor of my bathroom, not in the kitchen, not on the bed, on the floor of the bathroom, right next to the bucket catching the dripping water. Drip, drip, drip. I didn't turn on the light. I sat in the dark, hugging my knees, listening to the water. I felt as if I had been dismantled, like a broken clock, and someone had taken all the gears out and scattered them on a table. Here is your job gone. Here is your family gone. Here is your $25,000 gone. Here is Mom's cabin gone. Here is your father's respect. Did it ever even exist? My phone lay on the floor next to me. The screen was dark. Nobody called, nobody texted. 32 years old. And not a single person to tell me, Ash, I am here. It's going to be okay. Dylan would help with the lawyer and the documents, But Dylan wouldn't say, "It's going to be okay." He didn't know how, and I had no right to demand it. He was just another shard of our shattered family. The water dripped. Through the wall, I could hear my neighbors watching TV. Some reality show. A woman screaming. Studio applause. Other people's lives. Other people's dramas. And my drama was right here. On the cold tile floor in the dark. With no audience and no applause. At some point, I reached for my phone. Not to call anyone, but to look at Mom's picture. It was my lock screen. The peaches. The smile. The braid. I looked at her, and the tears finally came. Not pretty. Cinematic tears. Ugly tears. With gasping, sniffling, and wheezing. I sobbed on the bathroom floor like a 14-year-old girl who had just lost her mother all over again. Because I was losing her again. This time for good. Along with the cabin. Along with the memories. Along with everything. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe an hour. Maybe 20 minutes. When the tears ran out, I washed my face with cold water. Looked at myself in the mirror, puffy face, red eyes, wet hair, and said out loud, "Enough." One word, but it was like a light switch. Click, and the light changed. It didn't get brighter, it got clearer. I walked out of the bathroom, sat at my laptop, and wrote an email to Miss Sterling. Long, detailed, with the exact timeline, the anonymous call, the ruined interview, the suspected source. "This could qualify as defamation," I wrote. "I want to file a police report or send a cease and desist." The reply came in the morning. "Ashley, for defamation, we need a written statement from Helen Crawford confirming the call. Without it, it's just your word against theirs. But we will document the incident. Also, the probate records came back from the county. Come to the office. We have news." I took the subway to Midtown. Miss Sterling didn't meet me in her office this time, but at a coffee shop across the street. She ordered me a cappuccino, got a black coffee for herself, and slapped a folder on the table. "Ashley, I traced the whole chain. Listen carefully. Your mother inherited the Poconos property from her parents in 2002. After she died in 2006, the estate went to probate. Your father filed the paperwork in his name alone. He never filed anything on behalf of his minor children. He never notified the court of your existence as heirs to that specific property. The court simply didn't know. So, legally, you and your brother were entitled to 2/3 of that cabin as primary heirs, 1/3 each. He transferred the whole thing into his name, and now he has gifted Brenda a property he only legally owned 1/3 of. And we can absolutely contest this. We must. I have the lawsuit drafted, Miss," Sterling continued. 2 demands. First, recognizing you and your brother as the rightful owners of 2/3 of the cabin property. Second, invalidating the gift deed to Brenda Jenkins for those respective shares. Concurrently, we are filing an injunction against the city deed transfer for the Scranton house. The grounds. Your father actively deceived you into removing yourselves from the lease by withholding his intent to buy out the property. It is not an ironclad argument, but combined with the probate fraud, it establishes a clear pattern of behavior. I held the coffee cup and felt the warmth from the ceramic seep into my palms, up my wrists, and into my chest. For the first time in weeks, I was physically warm. "Miss Sterling, how much is this going to cost?" "Everything. Court fees, filings, your retainer. For the cabin, court fees will be a few hundred. The house injunction, about the same. My total fee for seeing both through will be around $7,000. $7,000. I had my $36,000 severance. Minus living expenses. It was enough. But I needed a job, and fast. "File it," I said. Miss Sterling nodded and pulled one more sheet of paper from her folder. "And one last thing. I ran a background check on Tyler Jenkins. The fraud felony is confirmed. 18 months probation. But there is more. He recently took out 2 payday loans, totaling about $3,000. Both are in default. Collections are already after him. Ashley, this guy isn't just unemployed. He is a convicted felon drowning in debt. And he is about to be handed 1/3 of your father's house." I set my cup down. The cappuccino had gotten cold. The foam had deflated and turned gray. Like my life over the last 2 months. But underneath that gray foam, the coffee was hot, bitter, and real. "When do we file the lawsuit?" "Tomorrow. I have the paperwork ready. I just need your signature and your brother's. Can he come in?" I took out my phone and called Dylan. He answered on the first ring, like he was waiting. "Dylan, tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. at the lawyer's office. We are signing the lawsuit. Silence. Then his voice, quiet but firm. I will be there. And Ash. I tracked down Aunt Martha. The old neighbor next to the cabin. She is still alive. She is? Yeah, she's 78, but sharp as a tack. I told her what was happening. She agreed to write a sworn statement that you and I spent every summer there, that you picked the apples, that I fixed the fence, that it was our home, not just Dad's. And she told me, Sarah's cabin belongs to Sarah's children. That's what she said. Sarah's cabin. Mom's. Ours. I hung up and looked out the coffee shop window. Midtown was buzzing. Cabs, people in suits, pigeons on the sidewalk. And I sat there with my cold cappuccino and felt that inside, in the place of emptiness and echo, something new had formed. Not warmth, more like heat, the kind of heat that melts metal down so it can take a new shape. Tomorrow we would file the lawsuit. Dad would get served. Brenda would find out that Sweetheart wasn't begging anymore. Sweetheart was demanding. And Tyler Jenkins, the quiet guy with the wooden sign on his door and a fraud conviction, would realize that his free house in Scranton was nothing but a pipe dream. But first, I needed to do one small, personal thing that had nothing to do with the court. I took the subway home, walked into my apartment, went into the bathroom, got on my knees in front of the sink, and pulled out the bucket. It was full to the brim. I dumped it out, grabbed a wrench, and crawled under the sink. 40 minutes later, the pipe was wrapped tight in plumber's tape. Not perfect, but it stopped dripping. A temporary fix. Like everything in my life right now. Temporary, but functional. I stood up, wiped my hands, and looked at the empty bucket. For 2 years, it had sat there collecting water because I didn't have the money for a repair. My money was going to Pennsylvania for surgeries, holidays, and washing machines for strangers. Not anymore. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. A text from Miss Sterling. Ashley, forgot to mention. I checked with the Scranton Housing Authority. The deed transfer is still pending review. We have a window of 2, maybe 3 weeks maximum. We move fast. 2 to 3 weeks. I looked at Mom's picture on the shelf. The peaches, the smile, the long braid. Mom, I said, we are going to war. We filed the lawsuit on Wednesday. Miss Sterling sent a process server to the Scranton courthouse. Dylan signed everything the day before when he came into the city for 2 hours. He took a half-day off work, took the bus from Allentown, signed the papers, and went straight back. We didn't even have time to grab coffee. 3 days later, Miss Sterling sent me an email. Lawsuit accepted. Preliminary hearing set for June 28th. I also filed the injunction with the Housing Authority. The deed transfer is frozen until the court reaches a verdict. They cannot finalize ownership until a judge rules. Frozen. I read the word 3 times. The deed transfer was frozen. Tyler Jenkins was not getting his third of the house. At least not right now. The first punch had landed. My dad found out that same day. He called me at 9:00 p.m. I was already in bed, scrolling through job postings on my phone. Ashley, what the hell are you doing? His voice wasn't high-pitched. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. It was his own voice. Angry, raspy, real. Brenda wasn't standing next to him, or if she was keeping her mouth shut. Hi, Dad. About what? Stop playing dumb. The city housing office just called me. They said the deed transfer is suspended. Pending litigation by Ashley Davis and Dylan Davis. Is this you? You are suing me? Not you. The situation. You transferred Mom's estate entirely into your name, even though Dylan and I were legal heirs. We were minors, Dad. You were supposed to protect our rights. Instead, you took it all and gave it to a stranger. Brenda is not a stranger. She is my wife, and we are your children. Or are we not anymore? Silence. I could hear his heavy, ragged breathing. And somewhere in the background, footsteps. Brenda was there, moving closer. Ashley. His voice shifted. It dropped lower, muffled. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking for her benefit. I am warning you. If you do not drop this lawsuit, we are done. You are no longer my daughter. I closed my eyes. The ceiling of my Astoria apartment. Darkness. Silence. You are no longer my daughter. 6 words. Each one a nail in a coffin. Dad, you already told me that on Easter. In different words, but the meaning was the same. I'm just a guest, remember? Well, guests don't sue, but heirs do. He hung up. I lay in the dark waiting for the tears, for the pain, for something. But inside, I was dry and quiet, like a prairie after a wildfire. The next day, something began that I hadn't anticipated. Brenda went on the offensive. Not legally, but socially. She struck where I least expected the relatives. Aunt Valerie called me around lunchtime. "Ashley, is it true you are suing your father?" Brenda called me crying, saying you want to kick them out on the street and steal their house. "Ashley, how could you? He is your father. He raised you." I gritted my teeth. "Aunt Val, I am not kicking anyone out. I am protecting my inheritance. Mom's inheritance. Dad gave Mom's cabin to Brenda, and he is signing the family house over to himself, Brenda, and her son, a convicted felon." "What felon? Tyler?" "Oh, he's a quiet boy. He wouldn't hurt a fly. A quiet boy with a felony record for identity theft and fraud. You can look up his court records online. They are public." A long pause. "Ashley, are you serious?" "Absolutely. And Aunt Val?" Brenda called my potential employer and told them I embezzle money. Anonymously, of course, but it's a funny coincidence. Aunt Valerie went quiet. I could hear her breathing fast. Then she said softly, "Sarah's cabin." "Yes, Aunt Val, Sarah's cabin. Mom's." She hung up without saying goodbye, but that evening, she sent me a text. "Ashley, I spoke to Brenda again. I asked her point blank about Tyler's felony. She said it was slander and you made it up, but her voice was shaking. I believe you, sweetie. Your mother would be proud of you. Mom would be proud." I read that text 6 times. Brenda had called everyone. Mom's old friend Mrs. Higgins, the neighbors on Elm Street, even Dylan's old middle school teacher. Everywhere, she spun the same story. The ungrateful daughter is suing her sick father for money. Ashley is greedy, heartless, forgot who fed her. But I didn't stay quiet either. I didn't call anyone first, but when they called me, I told them the truth. Calmly, with numbers, like an accountant. $25,700 in bank transfers. Giving away the cabin without notifying the heirs. Adding a convicted felon to the deed. Facts, not emotions. By mid-June, Brenda had lost her support group. Aunt Valerie stopped taking her calls. Mrs. Higgins sent my dad a physical letter in the mail, like in the old days. "Robert, what are you doing?" Sarah would never forgive this. The neighbors on Elm Street started greeting Brenda through gritted teeth. In a town like Scranton, news travels faster than the internet. And then something happened that accelerated everything. On June 20th, a week before the hearing, Miss Sterling called me. "Ashley, news. Tyler Jenkins was arrested by the police. Petty theft at a supermarket. He tried to walk out with a bottle of liquor and a pack of ribeye steaks. Total value, $80. On its own, it's a misdemeanor, but he is on felony probation. Any violation during probation is grounds for revocation. They are probably going to send him to jail." I sat in my kitchen and looked at Mom's picture. The peaches, the smile, and a strange feeling inside. Not joy, no. More like exhaustion. A deep, heavy exhaustion from dealing with people who destroy their own lives and blame everyone else. What does this mean for our case? Everything. If his probation is revoked, he goes to state prison. Technically, he is still on the lease, but he won't be a resident. And more importantly, it's a character indictment. The judge will see that your father added a convicted felon who continues to break the law to a municipal deed transfer. It perfectly reinforces our narrative. On June 28th, I drove to Scranton for the hearing. Dylan drove straight from Allentown. We met outside the county courthouse at 9:30 a.m. He was wearing his only suit, a little tight, bought 3 years ago on clearance. I was in the same suit I wore to the job interview that Brenda ruined. Dad arrived with Brenda and a lawyer. A young guy, maybe 30, in a cheap suit, clutching a briefcase. Brenda had hired him, I found out later, for $2,000. Money that was likely Dad's, or mine, the same $2,000 that had gone to something else back on Easter. Dad didn't look at me. He walked past, staring at the floor, treating me like empty space. Brenda, on the other hand, stared right at me. Her eyes were cold, void of honey, void of sweetheart. The real Brenda. The one who had always hidden behind the smile. Inside the courtroom, Miss Sterling laid out our cards methodically, the way I lay out a quarterly balance sheet. The probate fraud. Dad, failing to list his minor children as heirs. The lack of court oversight. Aunt Martha's sworn affidavit. The Davis children spent every summer utilizing the property. They had practical claim to the inheritance. Photographs. Me at the cabin at 16, Dylan fixing the fence at 18. Bank statements. $25,700 transferred to support the household. Brenda's lawyer tried to object. The children took their names off the lease voluntarily. The statute of limitations had expired. The money transfers were voluntary gifts. But Miss Sterling was ready. The statute of limitations for defrauding minor heirs begins when the heirs discover the fraud. I discovered it in April, when I found the deed transfer application and checked the county records. The judge, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, twirling a pen in her fingers, listened carefully. When Miss Sterling brought up Tyler's felony and his recent arrest for shoplifting, the judge looked up and stared at my dad. A long, heavy stare. Mr. Davis, were you aware of Mr. Jenkins' felony conviction at the time you added him to the municipal lease? My dad stayed silent. Brenda tugged his sleeve. Her lawyer started to say something, but the judge repeated, Mr. Davis, did you know? No, my dad said, quietly, almost a whisper. And in that no, I heard everything. He genuinely didn't know. Brenda had never told him. And now he was sitting in a courtroom, realizing that the woman he gave my mother's cabin to had been lying to him for 2 years. He turned to Brenda, slowly, like a man whose neck had rusted, and looked at her. She didn't look away, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch, that same corner she had used to smirk at me on Easter. The hearing lasted 2 hours. The judge scheduled a follow-up in 3 weeks to review the submitted evidence, but it was already clear which way the wind was blowing. On our way out of the courthouse, Brenda caught up to me on the steps. She grabbed my elbow. Her fingers were tight, strong, like a woman who had worked with her hands her whole life. You think you won? She hissed. You haven't won anything. Your father will curse your name. You will be completely alone. No family, no father, just your little pieces of paper. Are you happy? I carefully peeled her hand off my elbow. Brenda, I am already alone. You made sure of that. And those pieces of paper are all I have left of my mother, and I am not giving them up. She stood on the courthouse steps, and as I walked down, I could feel her stare on my back. Heavy, hateful, but no longer scary. It was much scarier back when she was smiling. Dylan was waiting for me by my car, silent, as usual. But when I walked up, he hugged me. Tight, awkward, like someone who isn't used to hugging, and said one word, good. We stood in the parking lot of the Scranton courthouse, 2 grown adults who had just gone to war with their own father. The sun was beating down, the asphalt was baking, pigeons were cooing somewhere nearby, and I thought, in 3 weeks is the second hearing, and Dad is going to walk in a different man, because today, he found out the truth. Not from me, not from Dylan, but from a judge, in a courtroom, in front of witnesses. He found out Brenda lied to him, that Tyler is a felon, that he broke the law by giving away the cabin. The only question is, what will he do with that? Will he accept it? Or will he choose Brenda again? I would find out in 21 days. But for now, I had tasks to complete. Find a job. Pay the lawyer. Don't break down. 3 tasks, like 3 lines on a spreadsheet that need to balance out. My phone vibrated. A text from Dad. The first in a month. Just 2 words. No punctuation. All lowercase. Ashley, call me. I didn't call right away. I stood in the parking lot, looking at those 2 words, and realized, if I call him right now, running on the adrenaline of the hearing, with the phantom grip of Brenda's fingers still on my elbow, I will say too much. Or worse, I won't say enough. Dylan, Dad texted. He wants me to call. Dylan looked at the screen, then at me. Don't call from the car. Call when you get home. He was right. I dropped him off at the bus station, waited until he disappeared through the doors, and drove back to New York. 2 hours on the highway. Semi-trucks, lane markers, the sun in the rearview mirror, and one thought looping in my head. He texted first. For the first time in 2 months, he reached out first. When I got home, I took a shower, brewed coffee, and sat in the kitchen. Mom's picture on the shelf. The peaches, the smile. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. His voice was quiet, unfamiliar. No anger, no looking over his shoulder for Brenda. The voice of a man who had just been punched and hadn't quite figured out where he was bleeding from. Ash, I didn't know about the felony. I swear to God. She never told me. I stayed silent, waiting. After the hearing, I confronted her. I asked her point blank. At first she denied it, then she started crying. Then she admitted it. She said it was a mistake of his youth, that he had turned his life around, and I asked her, Is stealing from a grocery store at 27 also a mistake of his youth? Dad. Wait, let me finish. I sat in that courtroom today and listened to what your lawyer said about the probate, the cabin, your legal shares. And Ash, I didn't realize. When I put the deed in my name, you were 14 and 9. I wasn't trying to cut you out. I just wanted the paperwork done so the state wouldn't take it. I wasn't stealing from you. Dad. And when you gifted the cabin to Brenda, were you not thinking then either? A long, heavy pause. She told me we needed to do it to qualify for a state home improvement grant, that if the deed was in her name, we could get money to fix the roof. I believed her. I always believed her. Ash, she knows how to talk, so you believe her. I closed my eyes. My father, 59 years old, a blue-collar factory worker who spent his whole life turning wrenches and trusted people because he himself never lied. And a woman who, over 2 years, methodically, step by step, took everything. The cabin, the house, the money, the kids. Not because she was evil, because she knew how. Dad, what do you want? I want to fix it, tell me how. 3 weeks later, the second hearing took place. But it didn't go the way anyone expected, not even Miss Sterling. Dad showed up without Brenda's lawyer, alone, in an old sport coat, unshaven, holding a manila folder. He sat at the defendant's table. When the judge asked for his position, he stood up and said, Your Honor, I concede to the plaintiff's demands in full. My children, Ashley and Dylan, have a legal right to their shares of the cabin. I made a mistake when I handled the estate, and I have already filed to revoke the gift deed to my wife. She does not agree, but I filed it anyway. The judge looked at him over her glasses, then at Miss Sterling, then back at my dad. Mr. Davis, do you understand the legal consequences of conceding this lawsuit? I do. The cabin belongs to the kids. It is what their mother would have wanted. Brenda was sitting in the gallery, in the back row, in the corner. I turned around. She was looking at my dad the way you look at someone who has suddenly stopped obeying orders. Not with hatred, with sheer bewilderment. As if a piece of furniture had suddenly started talking. The court issued a ruling a week later. The gift deed was ruled partially invalid. Dylan and I were legally granted title to 2/3 of the Poconos cabin. The city deed transfer for the Scranton house was canceled. Dad withdrew the application himself. By that time, Tyler Jenkins was no longer living in the house on Elm Street. After his shoplifting arrest, the DA filed to revoke his probation. The judge agreed. Tyler got 8 months in county jail. Brenda took his name off the lease herself, quietly, without a fight. The Tyler's room sign was taken down. And then Brenda left. Not immediately. For 2 more weeks, she lived in the house, silent, slamming doors, not cooking, not cleaning. Dad was silent too. 2 people in a 3-bedroom house who had nothing left to say to each other, because all the words had already been spoken in a courtroom, on the record, in front of witnesses. In August, she filed for divorce. Dad didn't contest it. Splitting the assets was quick. There was nothing to split. The cabin belonged to Dylan and me. The house was still a municipal lease, and she never did get that washing machine. Brenda moved back to Wilkes-Barre to live with some distant relatives. She never called again. Not Dad, not me. I found a job in September. Apex Management, chief accountant, $150,000 a year. During the interview, they asked why I left TechCore. I answered honestly and gave them Richard's number. There were no anonymous phone calls. I spent my first paycheck on my bathroom renovation. A real, full remodel. New pipes, new tile, a new vanity. A contractor from Jersey worked for 3 days, cursing at the old plumbing and drinking gallons of my coffee. When it was finished, I walked into the bathroom, turned the faucet off, and stood there for a minute, listening to the silence. Not a single drop. The bucket was gone. In October, Dylan and I drove up to the cabin in the Poconos. We hadn't been there in 2 years, not since Brenda hung her curtains and took down Mom's photos. We took down the curtains first, the kitten calendar second. Dylan brought a framed photo of Mom from Allentown, the same one I had rescued from the attic. We hung it back in its original spot, on the wall facing the window, overlooking the apple trees. Aunt Martha came over with a pie. She stood by the gate, watched us hang the picture, and cried, quietly, wiping her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Sarah's cabin, she said, just like it's supposed to be. Dad drove up later, around lunchtime. He had aged significantly over those few months. He had lost weight, started slouching, and his hair was completely white. We sat together, The three of us, at the table under the apple tree, eating Aunt Martha's pie in silence. It wasn't heavy or hostile. We just sat in silence, because the words hadn't returned yet. There was too much lying between us. You are a guest. You are not my daughter. The $25,000, the lawsuit, the divorce. That doesn't heal over one slice of pie. But Dad did do one thing. Before he left, he walked up to me, pulled a white envelope out of his jacket pocket, and handed it to me. Inside was $1,000. Crumpled, mixed bills. This is the first installment, he said, not looking me in the eye. I will pay you back every month, whatever I can. $1,000 out of 25 grand. A drop in the bucket. But I took the envelope, because it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that he offered it himself. Thanks, Dad. He nodded, got in his truck, and drove away. Dylan watched him leave and said, "You think he will change?" I don't know, but he tried. That is more than I expected. We closed up the cabin for the winter. I turned the key in the lock, the old squeaky lock, still Mom's, and put it in my pocket. My key to my house. It is December now. New Year's is coming up. Dylan is coming to stay with me in Astoria for the first time. We used to always go to Scranton to see Dad. This year, he is coming to me. I already bought a small, real pine tree. The whole apartment smells like needles, and I moved Mom's picture from the shelf to the windowsill so she could see the tree. Dad sent a text yesterday. "Happy holidays, Ash. Are you guys coming down?" I replied, "Maybe, Dad. We will see." Not no, not absolutely not. We will see. Because trust is like the pipe in my old bathroom. If it bursts, you can't fix it with a piece of tape. You have to replace the whole thing. And that takes time. I won't get my $25,000 back, but I got the cabin back. I protected the family home. I found a job. And I fixed my bathroom. But most importantly, I stopped being a resource. I stopped confusing usefulness with love. I stopped believing that if I just paid enough, they would finally call me their own. Whether they call me their own or not, it no longer depends on the amount written on a check. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit in my kitchen with a cup of tea and look at Mom's photo.